Welcome to the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm your host, Robin L. Owens, PhD, and this is where we dive in each week to give advice, tools, and tips for high-achieving, purpose-minded women who've written nonfiction books and want to amplify their message beyond the book. I'm a college professor, and when I'm not doing that, I am speaking, coaching, mentoring, and teaching high-achieving women who have written books how to use their books to make a bigger difference, have more impact, and purpose. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. I'm so glad you're here and that you take time to listen into the podcast. I really appreciate you for listening in. And if you're enjoying the podcast, go ahead and rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. It'll really help us. You've already helped us gain in the top 5% ranking of podcasts globally, according to the podcast search engine Listen Notes. So we appreciate you for doing that. And today I'm talking with Erin Lebacqz. Now, let me tell you about Erin. Erin is an author and a writing strategist. She is the author of the book, High Value Writing, Real Strategies for Real World Writing. And she helps leaders write with confidence, clarity, and strategy at work. She's been teaching writing for 25 years in business, academic, and public sectors, both in the United States and Asia. Her clients include the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and many companies in manufacturing, finance, and local agencies. Welcome, Erin Lebacqz.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk with you today.
I'm so glad you're here. So let's just jump right in. You heard me read your kind of official bio. Why don't you just tell people in your own words about who you are and the work you do?
Sure. Thanks, Robin. Hi, everybody. So I'm Erin Lebacqz, and I've been a teacher my whole life. In the second half of my teaching career, I've been really working with professionals to help people meet their goals, whether that's a business goal or a relationship goal or getting promoted or doing something new through writing with intention. I think a lot of us grow up in school thinking, ooh, my writing is a little scary. People are going to judge me. And we forget writing is for ourselves. We can own it and use it as a tool to meet a goal on purpose. So I help folks kind of leverage their own ability to think things through really well and just transfer that thinking into their words and help them meet goals independently by making good writing decisions.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Now, did you always enjoy writing? Because many people, they just find it very difficult and they don't enjoy writing. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing that you enjoy writing. So did you always enjoy writing?
You know, I enjoy it, but I will tell you, I did not go into writing because of enjoyment. So I'm a little different in that regard. And you're so right. Many people don't like it. I've had many students tell me that they are, quote, a bad writer, which is pretty much impossible when we consider writing is actually about thinking. We can all do it. We just need the strategies. But I had studied international relations. And when I went to start teaching, I was thinking, you know, what can I do to best empower my students? Is it learning history? Is it learning about society? And by watching my students, I realized at one point, no, it's helping them be able to use their voice confidently to meet their goals. And so I actually went into teaching writing as a way to sort of help other people meet what they're trying to do, because I just noticed it was one of the most powerful tools we have at our disposal. And most of us write every day, but we don't realize we could be leveraging that and using that writing intentionally.
Yeah. You know, recently I was thinking about just the act of writing. And in my mind, it's a miracle to be able to take what's in our head and express it. You know, when I say our heads, in our minds, to express it in a way that's physical like that. Just that whole process, you know, at a deep level, to me, I'm like, this is really amazing.
Well, it is. And you're so right, because you're making something out of nothing. And
Yes.
It's fascinating that our brains can generate new content any moment, including this conversation. We're doing it right now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me. It's quite amazing. All right. So I mentioned your book, High Value Writing. Tell us about the premise of the book.
The premise of the book is really, we can all be successful writers and have autonomy, independence, and ownership over our writing. I really felt observing people as I was teaching in different scenarios. Some folks, and I've been there myself, would feel like writing is almost arbitrary. You're typing away and you're kind of like, well, I hope it's good. And it seems almost accidental or random. Is this going to be liked? Is this going to get me the points or the promotion or the invitation to the committee, et cetera? But in reality, we can take care of that ourselves by thinking about two things. What are we trying to accomplish with a given piece of writing? And that includes just a post on Teams or a text. We always have a goal, email, document, whatever. And secondly, by thinking about who we're going to write to. And so the book is meant to be a brief, down and dirty, practical guide. Here is how you take control of your writing. Here's how sentences work. Here are the different things you can do to make your reader like your sentence, to express yourself concisely, to add tone for a relationship. And so the premise or goal of the book is we can all be independent and feel like we own our writing, which again, 25 years of observing people feel unconfident about their writing is what drives me to do this, because in class, when we talk about writing, everyone has lots of smart insights to say. So I know we can all do it. Many of us are just nervous about it. And so the book provides those strategies that you can just turn around and use that day and say, oh, look, my writing I'm feeling pretty proud of my writing right now, and it's getting the job done for me at work.
Yeah. What would you say, I'm guessing, because you have such vast experience working with others, leaders, and people in organizations, what would you say are some of one or two of the main the areas that they want to focus on or improve, like, that they struggle with, or maybe not quite a struggle, or that they're frustrated or just want to improve? What would you say, a couple things that come up?
Yeah, I'll give one that's kind of about the writing choices itself, and then another one that's maybe a tiny bit more abstract. The first one, probably the most common questions I've been getting for about the past year, and we're a couple years after the pandemic slightly, so maybe that's why. Everyone wants to know, how can I provide my reader with the right amount of information versus too much or too little? And readers say the same thing. They say, can people please write to where they give me what I need, but then not a whole lot more? And so we're all struggling to decide, how much detail does this reader need? How much context do they need? If I give them 3 paragraphs of context, it's less likely they're going to read the whole thing than if I give them 1, right? So we're constantly trying to walk that line between over and under informing. And that's one of the most sort of popular desires lately, is to think about that and try to solve that riddle. And then secondly, a lot of folks are waking up. And I say this because I think we're all noticing the power of writing more since we've gone remote, largely. People are starting to notice the relationship between words and power, and how we can even use writing to suggest who has more power in a situation, or I can adjust my writing to show more respect, to empower my reader or empower the person I'm speaking about on purpose. So we can actually use this communication strategy as a tool for building relationships and also managing power dynamics. And so it's kind of fascinating that we can do all of that just with word choice.
Yeah, I believe words are powerful. Back to the question about people asking whether it was either too much or too little. It made me think of a conversation I had with my sister a few months ago, and looking over her shoulder as she opened up an email. And it was about 3 paragraphs, and she immediately said, wow, this is a book. And so that was her way of saying, this email is too long.
Yes.
To me, I didn't even see that because I wasn't receiving it. So it made me think of that when you talked about people having that concern.
Well, it's a perfect example too, because it just suggests how, your sister saying that, it makes me think maybe she's not going to read the whole thing, or maybe she's at least not enthusiastic about it, or maybe she'll read it next week when she finally forces herself to.
Yes.
So that, we want to know that about our readers, right? So we can adjust.
Yeah, that was the impression I got too. That it just felt like too much, and just way too much. And as a person who has written a book, I was like, that's an interesting thing to say. It's a book, but I get it. All right. So now let's talk about your role as an author, as a person who has written this book. what would you say has been your greatest joy in both writing and getting your message out into the world?
I would say, you and I, Robin, have talked about how we have taught college and university courses. And then with me, with that as my background, when I stopped doing that and started a business teaching in the workplace, one of my big worries was that now I would only see my students one time. And, you're accustomed to seeing them twice a week for a semester or something like that. And it was a while for me to adjust. How do I teach in a setting where I don't have the time to help them really integrate what they're learning throughout their days? Well, the book fills in for that. The book, I wrote it, I believe anyway, my goal was to have the book really sound like me, sound like the way I am in class. There are examples from my classes in the book. And so now folks who come to class and they say, ooh, I really want to know more, I want to practice, they pick up the book and it meets them right where we left off, as if I'm still talking to them in class. So it's a joy for me to know that I can provide something educational in this new setting in the workplace, but still be able to give people that lasting learning that's longer term than just the one session.
Yes, yes. And it sounds like you're very passionate about this work, and it's close to your heart to make sure to help people with the writing and to improve their communication in this way. The importance of your message. What has been a challenge in getting your message out to people, out into the world, or your book into the hands of people?
Yeah, well, a couple things. I mean, I think a lot of what we do in our work and in society and in our communities, we maybe don't realize how much timing and luck have to do with things. And so I had, before the pandemic, still, I would say about 50-50. When I would teach a class, I would have to sort of say, hey, here's why writing matters. Here's what people might be forming a conception of you through your writing, et cetera. So there'd be a small part where I would sort of have to sell why this is worthwhile information. After the pandemic, I do not have to bring that up at all. Everyone knows, oh my gosh, I'm writing all the time and everyone is looking at it. Please help. And so that was sort of a timing issue that made it easier for me to get my message out, just by people having something that happened to us all that made us realize the need. And then I think the other obstacle to getting the book out specifically was just me being new. Coming out of schools, I didn't know that much about the publishing process. I self-published the book and had friends, colleagues, students help me get it out there, other teachers. And so I've learned a little better how to do that now. But for the first 6 months or so, I was very worried about how to do those things. And it took me a while to get the book starting to grow and get more popular.
Yeah, it sounds like you use your internal network to help you do that. Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
which I think is a great first step anyway. I mean, I think that's where it all begins. All right. So now this podcast is for what I call high achieving women.
Yeah.
Women who are ambitious, responsible at work, responsible at home, do a lot of the supporting of other people at work and at home. And they're doing all the things. And on top of that, now they've written a book.
Right. And then they have to support that too.
Yes, yes. And so I thought, I created the podcast to support what I call high achieving women.
Mm-hmm.
So now, given the woman I just described, what's a word of advice or some tip that you could say to her, either in her professional life as a person who's written a book and is trying to get it out there, or just from your experience as probably one of those women yourself?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess part of what I would say would be sort of practical, and then part of it would be maybe more theoretical about time and things like that. Super practical, sounds like a tiny tip, but it can take you far for all of us. Verbs are the words that not only let us be concise, but let us convey tone. And so for high achieving women, one of the things I've noticed about us, if I include myself, I guess, is that we may have grown up with some social conditioning about how we present ourselves in speech and writing. And sometimes that can make us look less confident accidentally because of our social conditioning. For example, I know many very professional women who still try to coach themselves to apologize less, or say thank you less, or self-reduce less. And when we accidentally use language, and I've been guilty myself, that says something like, this is just an idea, but I wonder if maybe we should consider talking about next month's metrics. I said about 3 sort of hedges there that maybe dismissed myself a little bit. And it's hard for us to get over that, I think, because we've been groomed to care for others' happiness all the time. And so we've sort of learned with our language to put ourselves second to an extent. So I would say that we want to look at that. And in order to really write with confidence and authority, it's about the verbs. Number one, we want to get to a verb sooner in our language. So instead of, it's just an idea, but I think maybe we should analyze these metrics. Maybe I just go, let's analyze these metrics. And I get to the action a lot sooner, which makes me confident and authoritative, not rude. I said, we're all going to do this together. It's not a power play. It's just me saying something in a straightforward way with less of that sort of introductory buffer material that can sound potentially insecure. And then verbs are also where we can know how to say something concisely but powerfully, because a verb carries more information than another word usually, but it also sets a tone. And I got a great example the other night, came up in a session where I'm always talking about verbs. I'll say something like, maybe Robin would say, hey, Erin, do you want to join me on the podcast? Or, hey, Erin, do you want to attend or register for the podcast? Well, I would rather join you than register or attend something, right? Because I feel like it's you and me together. So we were talking about that kind of thing. And one woman shared, at her job, management had just said, ooh, we're about to start peer observations. We're going to start our observation process, and you'll get observed by a manager as well, blah, blah, blah. Well, in the write-up, in the email, they did not use the verb observe. They used the verb watch. You will be watched starting next month. And so we know the cultural baggage of watch, now it sounds parental or big brother, et cetera. And so as women and people who have a lot on our plates, we can be concise and confident sounding by getting to the action sooner in our sentence. And then we can also take care that that verb doesn't take power away from someone else. Like, I'm going to watch you, I think puts me in the powerful place, but I'm going to observe you keeps us equal. Like, I'm going to learn from you as well as give you pointers from me. Yeah. And that, it's amazing how it brings us back to power. But as women, we can leverage that.
That's a powerful example.
Right? I was very happy that she brought it up in class the other night.
Yeah, that's a very powerful example, because often we might not be thinking about it. We're just kind of doing it as we've always done it. But now, by your saying that, I'm hoping that somebody right now has just got a breakthrough.
Right? Yeah, that the verb can change.
Yeah.
It can change how much your reader feels respected, condescended to, appreciated, valued, for sure.
Yeah, that's so important. Now, you know that the title of the podcast is Leadership Purpose. So now what you're thinking about purpose, do you think it's important to have purpose in your work, or at least a sense of purpose, or anything related to purpose? If so, why? If not, why not?
Well, I think I've always been lucky because since I've always been a teacher, I used to say, especially when I taught public ed, high school, college in the beginning, and of course, we all know the pay is fairly low. And I would say to myself, well, I don't make a lot in money, but at least I don't have to sit around checking my conscience. I know I'm doing something that's useful for somebody. I know I'm doing something that to me has a good purpose. And so I've always been able to work with that in mind. And I don't know any other way. If I go to a class, and I know people who teach speaking or coach speakers, for example, they say, hey, if you're nervous, think about what it is. What's your mission here? What are you trying to help your listeners learn? And so that's always made it easy for me, where I'm kind of like, I know that this is going to be an empowering message, so I don't really have to be nervous about providing it because it's goal-oriented for me and it's purpose-oriented for all of us. So I think having purpose helps us believe in our work and confidently bring it forth when we know that it's truly helpful for others.
Yes. And of course, I resonate with that. I would. Mm-hmm. Erin, now, is there anything I haven't asked you that you want to talk about? Maybe something came to mind or not when we are talking now that I just didn't get a chance to ask you before we can tell people how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, a couple of the conversation, we were having just now made me think of, I just wanted to share sort of 2 golden rules that I think we forget about writing, that might help people think about this, because this is not how we think about writing in school. Number 1, there is no right way to write. It is always situational, circumstantial. And I think we all grew up thinking, oh, I'm right or I'm wrong in how I did my paragraph. And that's just not true. And we all know it, because we could all write a message to a friend or client who's a teacher, and then another friend or client who's a lawyer, and maybe we would use slightly different language. So there is no one right way. And then the second piece of advice is just what I called my sort of writing truth bomb, which is, unless you're journaling or taking notes, you are not writing for you. And we don't learn that in school either. There is a human being out there that this is for. And so that is a whole paradigm shift for many folks. We want our focus to be outward when we write to the people reading it, not inward. We already know the information. So that adjustment is often enough to just make us more strategic with our writing.
Yeah, it's a real connector.
Yeah.
Erin, this has been so insightful, and I love words, so I can talk all day and all night, but I know you have things to do. And so I'm guessing people might want to hear where they can get the book, or just hear more about how they can be in touch with you. Where can they contact you?
Yeah, thanks, Robin. Well, my book is on the major booksellers, Amazon, Kobo, Barnes and Noble, a couple places around the world. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to meet folks. And you can always come over to highvaluewriting.com. I offer e-courses, including a leadership course that people can take on their own schedule to just level up and feel confident and lead our teams with grace through our intentional writing.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so you heard that, everybody. You can find Erin's work, and we'll be sure to put it in the show notes. Erin, thank you so much for taking time and being here today. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Robin. I enjoyed it a lot. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Okay, everyone. And if you want to hear more from me, you could find me. You know what? Actually, I'd like to hear from you. Drop me a message at LinkedIn. Just go give me a direct message, and it's at Robin L. Owens, PhD. At Robin L. Owens, PhD. I'd love to hear from you and get your thoughts on the podcast. And if you happen to have written a book and you're thinking about how to expand your message beyond the book, I have a free training on how you could create a course based on that book. So go over to createmasterfulcourses.com, createmasterfulcourses.com. And in the meantime, this is Dr. Robin. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Leadership Purpose with Dr. Robin podcast. If you enjoyed it, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop every week, and I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Meanwhile, this is Dr. Robin signing off. See you next time.